I think drones and drone warfare is much closer to the American way of war than it is to the Russian way of war. We won the Second World War because we were able to produce vast amounts of equipment and machinery to supply our forces. The American way of war is don't send a soldier or a Marine or a sailor or an airman where you can send a bullet or another weapon.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to another episode of What's Really Happening. I'm Dr. Tad Schnoffer, the Strategy and Research Manager here at the Global and National Security Institute at the University of South Florida. As always, we're joined by GNSI's Executive Director, retired Marine Corps General Frank McKenzie, as we discuss global and national security challenges. Today, we're going to discuss the spectacular attack of June 1st called Operation Spiderweb. This operation saw multiple quadcopter drones launched from delivery trucks that destroyed Russian strategic bombers across air bases deep within Russian territory. Additionally, we'll discuss the naval drone attack on the Kerch Bridge that happened just days after Operation Spiderweb. Well, welcome back, General.
Always good to be with you, Ted.
So we're talking about Operation Spiderweb and this drone attack from June 1st on a number of Russian strategic bombers and nuclear bombers, if you will. But have we seen anything like this attack in the past?
Well, strangely, early in the Syrian civil war, a drone attack, not completely unlike this, was executed against the Russian air base at Hmeimah on New Year's Day. I want to say it was 2015 or 16. I may have that New Year's Day wrong, but it was during that period of time. And it was executed by ISIS. It was a very successful attack using very, very inexpensive drones, dropping grenades and other things. Russians were killed and a number of airplanes were destroyed. So there's a little bit of history with this. And the history doesn't tend to be new. It tends to repeat itself. So this is just the same thing on a much, much larger and more sophisticated scale.
And on that much larger scale, a number of people or media outlets, if you will, have called this Russia's Pearl Harbor. Is that really a good analog, or is it?
Chad, I don't know if I'd go that far. I would say it is a moment of stunning embarrassment for Russia. And it strikes something they can't replace, which are their strategic bombers. And as you know, the strategic bombers have been used to carry out attacks against Ukraine, perfectly legitimate target for Ukraine to strike. But they also serve another purpose. They're pointed against the United States. And those airplanes haven't been built in over 30, 40 years. They're not going to be replaced. The Tu-95 is a workhorse bomber. I know some Tu-95s were destroyed. I assume some Tu-160s, the big other heavy penetrating bomber, was also hit. Don't know the details of that. All of this has tended to attrite the Russian strategic nuclear force, which is destabilizing and not a good thing.
But is this attack, the numbers vary in the number of aircraft destroyed, some say 10, some say up to 40. Is this really crippling to the Russian, let's say, nuclear triad?
It's damaging. It hurts. It hurts. And you're right. We don't know the exact numbers. I would tend to say, if I were saying, I'd say several dozen aircraft were probably destroyed or damaged. And the damaged aircraft might not be replaceable. You don't know. Right. There's some ugly pictures that have appeared in public media of where a lot of aircraft have been damaged or destroyed. So we'll have to wait and see.
What's your perspective on the Russian leadership's response, so whether that's military leadership or, let's say, Putin's leadership as they look to respond to this attack?
Well, first of all, I think they've got to understand how it happened and what it exposed. It exposed a leaky border for Russia. That equipment had to be driven there. It had to cross a Russian border somewhere in a series of large trucks. They were able to position those trucks near Russian air bases. Didn't seem to have much trouble doing that. And then after launch of the drones, they were able to prosecute those attacks with very little effective defensive capability. So all of those things have got to worry the Russians. And they're going to have to take action to try to fix those things. And then they'll have to determine responsibility for it. Who slipped up? The Russians will have no trouble finding heads to roll over this, I'm sure.
Right. But what does that say about the overall defensive complex against attacks like these kind of irregular warfare, unconventional attacks?
So it tells you Russia's not very good at it. I would extrapolate and say neither are we. We should draw lessons from this. What are the lessons? First of all, we're not a closed police state like Russia is. Much harder to do this, much harder to defend ourselves in the United States. But we need to pay attention to what crosses our borders. We need to be very good at that because those things are not manufactured in Russia. They were hauled into Russia, and they'd be hauled into the United States. And we need to continue along the trajectory that we're on about providing effective terminal defense for against UAVs, unmanned vehicles, at our air bases, particularly here in the United States. And that would start, I think, by normalizing who's responsible for it. We need to decide who's going to be responsible for this threat. It's not a local police matter when it comes to defending a nuclear air base. The Air Force has got to have the ability to act to defend itself effectively, or we're going to face eventually episodes like we just saw happen in Russia.
Well, just like the Russians and many other major military forces, they have anti-air capabilities, but typically that's more focused on larger aircraft. So these smaller quadcopter drones, which you can just get off the shelf, and many of them were just manipulated right off the shelf for these type of attacks. How do you defend against those smaller?
So you do it a variety of ways. First of all, you can jam them. You can now you've got to be careful about jamming because broadband jamming shuts everything down.
Right.
You've got your own systems, particularly an airfield that you're going to want to run. So you want to be able to make it hard for the attacker to communicate with his drone or to send signals to his drone. That's number one. Number two, if you believe they're going to attack you with a GPS type of drones, one that draws its location from satellites, you can employ GPS jamming. Again, Tad, the problem with GPS jamming is fix your own systems. So you got to be careful about that. Then there are kinetic systems that you can use to strike drones directly once you acquire and see them. They could be something like a projectile, could be maybe a non-kinetic but damaging microwave radiation, could be nets that are thrown up. It could be other drones that fly and attack the drone in midair, suicide drones. Look, there are a variety of systems that are out there. Many of those we're working on right now, and they're very promising. We have a long way to go, but we're much further along than we were when I was the Central Command commander. I was very concerned about this. This is one of my very highest priorities. I believe it's getting appropriate attention now within the Department of Defense. We need to continue to work on this because here's the thing. The attacker has the advantage because it's much cheaper to build these systems than to build defenses. And the attacker only has to be right once. The defender's got to be right all the time. So it's a heavy burden for a defender to carry.
Well, as we noted, non-state actors have this capability as well as state actors. So how do you defend pretty much everywhere all the time? I mean, it's a pretty comprehensive defensive plan you'd have to have.
It is a comprehensive defense. It's going to require a comprehensive approach. You're going to have to look at how bases in defended localities interact with local police jurisdictions, how that's going to be coordinated. We have some work to do there, probably some constitutional work to do there that needs to be looked at. But we need to get ahead of this because it's coming to the United States. Just a question of time, Tad, till an attack like this occurs in the United States.
Obviously we have a couple major initiatives in the U.S. now, the Golden Dome, for example, for air defense against ballistic missiles. But is this a layer below that? This is something
I would
different.
think it could be nested in a Golden Dome. I think it should follow. Look, we're talking about defending the United States against all manners of threats. So you need to prepare against ballistic missile defense, against ballistic missile attack, I should say. You also need to be prepared against the very small drones that can be launched from inside your territory, as well as long-range cruise missiles that fly at low altitudes that could be launched externally to the United States. These are all part of the same problem. They require different systems. They need to be integrated. Look, I believe we have the ability to do this.
Sure.
I applaud what the administration is doing right now, moving forward with this. We need to keep at it. It's coming.
With that in mind, there's the cost of the losses. Let's go back to Russia and the number of strategic bombers, which are millions of dollars each, and these drones are a couple hundred, maybe a few $1,000s each. How does that weigh on the Russian war machine?
I think the loss of these bombers is going to, first of all, affect their ability to attack Ukraine. Second, it will affect their ability to posture a third of their triad. As you know, the triad is the combination of land-launched intercontinental ballistic missiles, sea-launched ballistic missiles, and of course, manned aircraft. And what the Russians have now encountered is an experience where they've lost a significant fraction of that third category of the triad, the manned aircraft. That's going to be a factor for them.
How does that affect the negotiation table, whether it's Russians negotiating with the United States or the Russians negotiating on the peace table with the Ukrainians?
I think the immediate Russian response is going to be to get even. They're going to try to strike Ukraine hard to demonstrate that they still have mastery of the battle space. They're a little bit on their back heel right now. Ukraine had a very successful attack. There's no other word to characterize it. It's very successful. It'll be interesting to watch Moscow's response. I know in the last couple of days, they've launched heavy drone strikes into Ukraine. I think this is probably not the end of the Russian response. It will have an effect on Russia's strategic posture as well, vis-a-vis the United States and NATO and other countries, because it removes some of the depth from their strategic bomber force.
Does this leave Russia more vulnerable than it has been in before? Is it still roughly capable of?
Russia remains very, very capable. It removes flexibility. That's what it does. It limits their ability to respond to these kinds of problems because they now have fewer strategic bombers with which to do. The advantage of a strategic bomber versus a missile is you can recall it. You can retarget it. It has a crew that sits inside it that can make intelligent decisions in flight. Once you launch a ballistic missile, the term ballistic applies. It follows the laws of ballistics to its trajectory and probably can't be recalled. You just have a lot more flexibility with manned bombers. Russia now has fewer of those.
Does this affect the Russian-Chinese relationship at all? As the Chinese build up their nuclear
I think
program?
it affects Russia's relationship with everyone.
And as we look forward to the proliferation of these drones on the battlefield, what's that going to mean for the United States military and other large state militaries that have to deal with these?
Well, Tad, as we've already talked a little bit, it means we need to continue along the trajectory we're on about developing comprehensive defensive systems. And they range from point defense, right where the drone's aiming to strike, all the way out to tinkering with the supply chain for these drones to try to make them less effective. I mean, it is a comprehensive effort in space and in time to defend yourself against drones.
And is it also a component of standoff, being able to give yourself some space from where these things can be
Standoff is good,
but
although in the case of Russia, they struck bases, up well inland from Ukraine, and there was no standoff provided because the Ukrainians were able to get their weapons very close to the targets.
Right, and that's concerning. Obviously, Russia. I think one of the attacks was over 5,000 kilometers within Russia, so that's a very deep.
And we should take the advantage of drawing and draw a lesson here. Right. It's coming for us. It's inevitable. We need to be prepared for it.
And speaking of additional preparations for other types of drone attacks, just a few days after that, there was another major maritime unmanned drone attack on the Kerch Bridge. So what's that showing us beyond just the land attack, that these drones are ubiquitous?
Well, we've dabbled in undersea unmanned vehicles for a long time. We have a very good capability there. Ukraine obviously has a capability there. Others have capabilities as well. It's no different than long-range aerial drones. Same principle applies. It's a multi-domain threat. You need to be prepared to defend yourself in every one of these domains.
Does it mean that as militaries continue to advance with this, we're going to see a lot more drones on the battlefield and maybe even personnel? Like, you still need personnel, but you're going to see more of the drones.
I think you're going to see more drones. I mean, that's inevitable. But I think, the answer is going to be, it's going to be a hybrid solution. Drones augment maneuver, and maneuver as human beings on the ground, moving to occupy spaces on the ground. Man's a land-dwelling animal. To control land, you've actually got to put somebody down there to do that. Drones can be a very important part of that work, but they're not ever ultimately going to supplant the need to put human beings on the ground.
Because we've seen the Russians mobilize about another 160,000 roughly forces in preparation for a possible summer offensive. As we look at mobilizations in the case of future conflicts, you don't believe drones are going to, in a sense, augment or decrease the need for those numbers?
I think drones and drone warfare is much closer to the American way of war than it is to the Russian way of war. We won the Second World War because we were able to produce vast amounts of equipment and machinery to supply our forces. The American way of war is don't send a soldier or a Marine or a sailor or an airman where you can send a bullet or another weapon. So I think philosophically, we will be much more open to the employment of unmanned systems, autonomous systems below the surface of the earth, on the surface of the earth to assist infantrymen, in the air, and of course in space.
And to wrap up, does this give, going back to the overall attacks from drones from Ukraine, is this giving it any additional leverage or leading it towards a peace agreement or a win, if you will?
I think it helps. I think it helps because it puts more pressure on Putin. Several other things are going to have to come into it. It did not change. Let me put it to you like this, Tad. It did not change the essential balance of power.
Right.
So good that it happened, I think, but will not in and of itself be the tipping point.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, General.
Always great to join you, Tad.
That's going to wrap up another episode of What's Really Happening. Today, we held an intriguing discussion with GNSI's Executive Director, retired Marine Corps General Frank McKenzie, about the recent Operation Spiderweb. I'm Dr. Tad Schnaufer here at the Global and National Security Institute. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to our next conversation when we find out what's really happening.